The sound was not loud, but it sliced through the terminal's dull roar like a scalpel. It was a laugh, a short, sharp, nasal puff of amusement. It was aimed directly at Elijah Thompson's first-class boarding pass. He and his wife Serena froze. All the exhaustion from their 4 a.m. wake-up. The stress of the security line and the quiet excitement for their anniversary trip evaporated, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. The gate agent, a woman with a name tag reading Brenda, was smirking. "First class, that's cute," she sneered, her eyes flicking over their faces. "Let's see the real tickets." They didn't know that just 3 feet behind them, the unassuming man in the tweed jacket, the man who owned the entire airline, had just looked up from his newspaper. The air in Chicago O'Hare's International Terminal 5 was a familiar soup of anxiety-stale coffee and the cloying sweetness of a Cinnabon stand 3 gates down. It was 7:30 a.m., but the terminal had the frantic, timeless energy of a place where circadian rhythms came to die. Elijah Thompson checked his watch, a nervous habit. He gently squeezed his wife Serena's hand. "Flight 771 to London. Gate M12. Boarding in 40 minutes. Serena read from her phone, her voice a little tight. "We're fine. We have plenty of time. We can even grab that coffee now." "I know, Elijah sighed, adjusting the strap of his leather garment bag. "This presentation, it's everything." "You'll be brilliant," Serena said, rising on her toes to kiss his cheek. "You always are. But this," she gestured between them, "this is our time. 10 years, Elijah. We survived 10 years of my terrible cooking and your obsession with obscure documentaries." He laughed, a genuine warm sound that made a few stressed-out travelers look over. "My documentaries are fascinating, thank you very much. And your cooking is evolving." They were a picture of understated success. Elijah was a vice president of strategy at a burgeoning tech firm, and this London trip was a dual-purpose monster, their 10th wedding anniversary, for which he'd splurged on TransGlobal's finest first-class pods and the single most important presentation of his career. He was meeting with a consortium of British investors to finalize a merger that would make his company a global player. Serena, a talented interior designer, whose work was beginning to grace the pages of architecture magazines, had cleared her schedule for 2 full weeks. This was not just a vacation. It was a victory lap for a decade of struggle, of shared dreams, whispered in a cramped apartment, of supporting each other through failures and triumphs. They looked the part not in a flashy way, but in the quiet confidence of people who had earned their place. Elijah wore a custom-tailored navy blazer over a simple black t-shirt, and Serena was elegant in a comfortable but chic cashmere travel set. They were by any definition the exact demographic for first class. As they approached gate M12, they saw the line was already splitting into the familiar castes of air travel, the long, winding queue for economy, and the short, self-important trickle for priority and first. Presiding over the gate was a woman who looked like she was carved from compressed disapproval. Her name tag, pinned slightly askew on her navy blue TransGlobal uniform, read, Brenda Jensen. Brenda was in her late 40s, with hair dyed a shade of blonde that bordered on hostile, and a fine web of lines around her mouth that suggested smiling was an unnatural, painful act. Brenda Jensen hated mornings. She hated the smell of the Cinnabon. She hated the entitlement of the priority passengers and the cluelessness of the economy passengers. She had been with TransGlobal for 22 years, and in that time her dreams had evaporated. She'd wanted to be a purser traveling the world in glamorous uniforms. Instead, she was stuck at O'Hare, a glorified bouncer with a barcode scanner, her life reduced to a series of "have a nice flight" platitudes that tasted like ash in her mouth. She scanned the approaching line with a sour, judgmental gaze. Her eyes snagged on Elijah and Serena. She watched them walk, noting their clothes, their luggage, the easy way they held hands. Her lip curled. They were in the first-class line. Of course. Probably flying on points, scrounged from a dozen credit cards, she thought. Or maybe her brain supplied with a venomous whisper it wasn't their money at all. She'd seen it before. Loud, flashy types trying to talk their way into upgrades, acting like they owned the place. Elijah and Serena, oblivious to the simmering resentment aimed their way, approached the podium. Their passports and Serena's phone displaying the digital boarding passes ready. "Good morning," Elijah said, his voice pleasant. Brenda didn't respond. She simply held out her hand, her acrylic fingernails tapping an impatient rhythm on the counter. "Passports." Elijah handed them over. Brenda snatched them, her eyes darting from the photos to their faces with exaggerated suspicion. She seemed to take an unusual amount of time holding the documents up to the light, as if she expected them to be crude forgeries. "Boarding passes, she grunted. Serena held her phone under the scanner. The machine beeped a cheerful green confirmation. Brenda scanned Elijah's pass printed on paper. Another green beep. But Brenda did not look up. She did not say, "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." She stared at her screen. Her brow furrowed. She typed something, her nails clicking loudly. Then she looked up, a slow, insincere smile spreading across her face. And she laughed. It was not a giggle. It was a sharp, nasal scoff, a sound of pure, unadulterated disdain. It was loud enough for the first dozen people in both lines to hear. "First class?" Brenda said, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "Oh, that's ambitious." The world seemed to shrink around Elijah and Serena, compressing into the small, fluorescent-lit space in front of the podium. The background noise of the terminal, the announcements, the rolling suitcases, the distant chatter faded to a dull hum. The only thing that mattered was Brenda's smirk and the echo of her laugh. Elijah felt a hot flush creep up his neck. He kept his voice perfectly even. "I'm sorry, is there a problem with our seats?" "The problem," Brenda said, leaning forward as if sharing a secret, though her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, "is that these seats, 1A and 1B, are premium flagship seats, and my system is showing a, shall we say, hold on them." Serena, who had been momentarily paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the woman, found her voice. "A hold. What does that mean?" "We booked these 2 months ago. I have the confirmation email." "Oh, I'm sure you do, honey," Brenda replied, waving a dismissive hand. She turned her attention back to Elijah. "Sir, it's highly irregular for tickets of this value to be, well, let's just say the system flags things. I'll need to see the credit card you purchased these with, and photo ID again." Elijah's jaw tightened. This was not a security check. It was a humiliation ritual. He could feel the eyes of the other passengers on them. A man in a crumpled suit behind them huffed impatiently. "This is ridiculous," Serena whispered, her face pale. "Elijah, they're all staring." "It's okay," Elijah murmured back. He calmly took his wallet out, extracted his driver's license and the high-limit corporate Amex he'd used for the booking, and placed them on the counter. "Here is my ID, and here is the card used for the purchase. The name is Elijah Thompson. It matches the passport. It matches the ticket." Brenda picked up the card as if it were contaminated. She squinted at it. "A corporate card. I see." Her tone implied everything. Of course, it's not even your own money. She turned back to her terminal and began typing with agonizing slowness. Each keystroke was a small performance, a physical demonstration of the massive inconvenience they were causing her. She sighed, she squinted, she shook her head, almost imperceptibly. She hummed. No, this just isn't working. What isn't working? Elijah pressed his patience wearing dangerously thin. You scanned our passes. They beeped. You have my ID and the card. Brenda finally pushed the cards back across the counter, a look of final smug authority on her face. Sir, I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but the system has voided these tickets. It happens sometimes when there's a fraud alert. She said the word fraud with deliberate emphasis. The man in the crumpled suit groaned. Oh, for God's sake. Just deal with it, ma'am. Elijah said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous octave. I am a vice president at my company. These tickets, along with our hotel and travel, were booked through our corporate travel agency. They are not fraudulent. They are not voided. I am looking at the charge on my Amex app right now. It posted 63 days ago. $14,220. Now I am asking you politely to scan our passes again and let us on this flight. Brenda's smile vanished, replaced by a mask of cold indignation. She was being challenged. She who held the power to strand anyone, to ruin their day, their week, their multi-thousand-dollar vacation. And she was being challenged by him. Sir, she said, her voice rising, you do not get to tell me how to do my job. I have been doing this for 22 years. I know what a fraudulent ticket looks like, and these are flagging every system I have. These tickets are invalid. Brenda, what's the hold-up? A younger gate agent, Gary, called from the jet bridge door, his face nervous. I'm handling it, Gary, Brenda snapped without looking at him. She turned back to Elijah. I'm going to have to ask you and your associate to step aside. You are holding up the boarding process for our valid first-class passengers. My associate, Serena's voice was sharp. She's my wife, and we are valid first-class passengers. Not according to Transglobal, you're not, Brenda sneered. Now step aside or I will be forced to call security. Then call them, Elijah said. His body was rigid, a statue of controlled fury. We are not moving. We are not stepping aside. We are boarding the flight we paid for. Or you will get your supervisor down here right now to explain to us in detail why we are being subjected to this. Brenda's eyes glittered. This was the moment she loved. The confrontation. The power. She laughed again, that same horrifying, dismissive sound. Supervisor Honey, I am the supervisor for this gate, and you're not asking for anything anymore. She picked up the phone at her podium. This is Brenda Jensen at M12. I have 2 passengers non-compliant causing a disturbance. They're refusing to leave the boarding area. Yes. Send them now. She hung up and gave them a triumphant smirk. Security is on its way. You can explain your corporate card to them. Maybe they'll be more impressed than I am. Serena's eyes filled with tears of pure, unadulterated rage. Elijah, they're going to arrest us. They're going to arrest us for trying to board a plane we paid for. The rest of the line watched a mixture of embarrassment, impatience, and for a few, a grim voyeuristic pleasure. Someone's phone was up recording. Elijah saw it, but he didn't care. He was past that. He was in a cold, clear bubble of injustice. Let them record, he said to Serena. Let everyone see what Transglobal calls customer service. 3 feet back, a man in a rumpled tweed jacket, who had been patiently waiting in the first-class line, folded his copy of The Economist and placed it under his arm. He had greying hair, a kind, unassuming face, and looked more like a history professor than a high-powered executive. He had observed the entire 10-minute interaction with a growing, sickening knot in his stomach. His name was Arthur Harrington, and he owned the airline. The tension at the gate thickened, becoming as soupy and unpleasant as the morning air. The arrival of security at an airport gate is a spectacle. It changes the atmosphere instantly, from one of mundane transit to one of potential crisis. Passengers in the economy line stood on their toes to get a better look, their phones held up more brazenly now. 2 airport police officers, not TSA, but Chicago PD, arrived. They were large men, their faces set in the impassive, weary masks of officers who have dealt with too many travel-related meltdowns. "What's the problem here?" the taller officer, a man with the name Kowalski on his vest, asked. Brenda Jensen's entire demeanor shifted. She became a portrait of the embattled professional victim. She pointed a perfectly manicured accusatory finger at Elijah and Serena. "Officer, thank goodness," she said, her voice laced with manufactured distress. "These 2 individuals are refusing to leave the boarding area. Their tickets are fraudulent. My system has voided them, and they became aggressive. They're holding up an entire international flight. I'm worried for the safety of the other passengers." Fraudulent, aggressive. Serena's shock was so profound, it momentarily eclipsed her anger. "We were standing here. You are the one who laughed at us. You are the one who's been aggressive." "See what I mean?" Brenda said to Officer Kowalski, rolling her eyes. "Completely hysterical." Kowalski looked at Elijah. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step over there away from the podium so we can sort this out." "We've already tried to sort this out," Elijah said, his voice shaking with the effort of keeping it level. "That woman has insulted us, profiled us, and is now lying to you. We are not moving. We are not a security threat. We are ticketed passengers. Here." He held up his phone. "Is the booking. Here is the confirmation. Here is the charge on my credit card. What more do you need?" "Sir, I'm not going to ask you again." Kowalski said, his hand moving toward his belt. His partner, Officer Chen, moved to flank Serena. This was it. This was the nightmare. Every black parent's talk with their child, every cautionary tale, every headline. It was all culminating here at Gate M12 over a simple vacation. Elijah knew that if he raised his voice, if he gesticulated, if he showed 1/10 of the rage he was feeling, he would be on the ground. "Elijah, just step back," Serena pleaded, her hand on his arm. "Let's just step back. It's not worth it." "It is worth it, Serena," he said, his voice cracking. "We did nothing wrong." "You heard your wife, buddy," Officer Kowalski said, stepping forward. "Take a walk." From the line, a passenger who had been watching impatiently finally piped up. She was a woman in her 60s, dripping in gold jewelry, her face a mask of entitlement. "Let's call her Margaret." "For heaven's sake, officers," Margaret shouted. "Just remove them. We are all going to miss our connections in London because these people can't follow simple rules. If your ticket is bad, it's bad. Go back to customer service and stop making a scene. So entitled." A small murmur of agreement went through the impatient crowd. They didn't care about justice. They cared about an on-time departure. Brenda flashed Margaret a grateful smile. This was the validation she needed. The crowd was on her side. She was the protector of the schedule, the guardian of the gate. "As you can hear," Brenda said to the officers, You're disrupting the entire terminal. Now step aside or you will be arrested for trespassing." Kowalski put his hand on Elijah's arm. It was a point of no return. A jolt, both physical and metaphorical, went through Elijah. He was about to be physically removed, arrested, and his life, this trip, this presentation, his reputation was about to be detonated by a single, hateful gate agent. "Take your hand off me," Elijah said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Sir, you are now interfering with the police. Officer, please wait." The voice was not loud. It was calm, measured, and carried the effortless, unassuming weight of absolute authority. It was the voice of a man who had never in his adult life had to raise it to be obeyed. Everyone turned. The man in the tweed jacket, Arthur Harrington, had stepped out of the line. He held his own passport and boarding pass in one hand, his folded newspaper in the other. He looked directly at Officer Kowalski. Brenda Jensen spun around, her face twisted in annoyance. "Sir, this is an active security situation. This does not concern you. Please get back in line, or I will have you removed as well." Arthur Harrington's gaze shifted from the officer to Brenda. He looked at her. His head tilted slightly as if studying a particularly puzzling insect. His eyes were a pale, piercing blue. "An active security situation," he repeated, his voice thoughtful. "Is that what you call this, Miss Jensen?" Brenda's breath hitched. A flicker of recognition, a terrible, dawning horror began to creep into her eyes. It wasn't that she recognized him as a celebrity. She recognized him from the grainy, mandatory, 8-hour antitrust and corporate policy training videos she was forced to watch while playing games on her phone every year. The videos always started with a message from the CEO. The younger agent Gary, who was still standing by the jet bridge door, went bone white. He felt his stomach drop. Mr. A. Harrington," Brenda stammered. The blood drained from her face, leaving her foundation-caked skin a sickly mottled beige. I didn't. You're flying. Today." "I am," Arthur Harrington said, his voice perilously soft. "I am flying on my own airline. Transglobal Airways, Flight 771, in Seat 2A as it happens. I often fly commercial, Miss Jensen. It's the only way to see what's really going on." He took a step forward, and the two officers, sensing the tectonic shift in power, unconsciously took a step back. The world at gate M12 had not just paused. It had been vacuum-sealed. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant automated announcement for a flight to Dublin. Margaret, the loud passenger, looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. Officer Kowalski's hand, which had been so firmly planted on Elijah's arm, was now hanging awkwardly at his side. Brenda Jensen was frozen in a rictus of terror. "Mr. Harrington," she said again, her voice a reedy whisper. I was following procedure. The system flagged their tickets. It was a red flag. I was protecting company assets." "Company assets," Arthur Harrington repeated, savoring the phrase as if it were a particularly bad wine. He turned his piercing gaze from Brenda to the two officers. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice polite but steely, "I am Arthur Harrington, the founder and chief executive officer of Transglobal Airways. This airline," he made a sweeping gesture at the podium, the jet bridge and the 707 visible out the window, "is my company." The officers, Kowalski and Chen, immediately straightened. They were no longer dealing with a disgruntled passenger. They were dealing with one of the most powerful men in Chicago. "Sir," Kowalski said, his tone shifting instantly to one of deference, We were just responding to a call from the gate agent. I know. Harrington cut him off, holding up a hand. I was here for the entire interaction. I saw and heard everything from the moment Ms. Jensen laughed at these passengers. He then turned not to the officers, not to Brenda, but to Elijah and Serena. His entire demeanor softened. The ice in his eyes melted, replaced by a profound, almost paternal look of apology. Mrs. Thompson, he said, reading Elijah's name from the Amex card still sitting on the counter. On behalf of the airline that bears my family's name, I am mortified. There are no words to adequately express my apology for the treatment you have just received. Elijah, still vibrating with adrenaline and rage, could only nod. Serena, her hand over her mouth, finally let a tear of relief and residual fear roll down her cheek. This is not a procedure, Miss Jensen, Harrington said, his voice dropping back into a refrigerated calm as he turned to her. This was a discretionary, malicious, and based on what I witnessed, racially motivated act of harassment. You did not check a flagged system. You invented one. I watched you. You typed nothing for 30 seconds and then declared the tickets voided. You used your position to bully and humiliate two of our highest-paying customers. No, Brenda cried, her voice cracking with desperation. I didn't. It was real. The system. Gary. Gary, tell him. Tell him the system is slow today. She looked at the younger agent. Gary, her eyes wide and pleading a silent, desperate command. Gary, who had been trying to blend into the wall, looked at Brenda, then at the CEO of the company, then at the floor. He was shaking. Mr. Harrington, sir. Gary stammered. The scanner beeped green for both of them. I saw it. There wasn't a flag. I didn't see a flag. It was a catastrophic, final betrayal. Brenda looked at Gary as if he had physically stabbed her. You little... She started, but Harrington cut her off. Enough, he snapped. The single word cracked like a whip. He stepped past the officers, picked up Elijah's boarding pass from the counter, and walked to the scanner himself. He motioned for Elijah and Serena to follow. Please, he said gently. Allow me. He scanned the pass. The machine gave its cheerful affirmative beep. Welcome aboard, Mr. Thompson. He gestured to Serena. Mrs. Thompson. She held out her phone. Beep. Welcome aboard, Mrs. Thompson. He then turned back to the crowd. Boarding for Trans-Global Flight 771 will be paused for 5 minutes while we resolve this internal matter. My apologies for the delay. He walked back to the podium, his face a mask of cold fury. He looked at Brenda, who was now visibly weeping, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. It garnered her no sympathy. Ms. Jensen, Arthur Harrington said, his voice low and final. You will hand your official trans-global credentials and your airport security badge to your colleague, Mr. Gary. What? No? Arthur, Mr. Harrington. Please, I have 22 years with this company. 22 years. And in 22 minutes, you have managed to undo millions of dollars in brand goodwill. Harrington countered. You have exposed this company to a lawsuit that I can assure you we will lose, and you have done it, all it seems, for the simple, petty pleasure of ruining someone's day. I have a family, I have a mortgage, she pleaded. You should have thought of that, Harrington said, his voice devoid of any emotion, before you decided to play God with Gate M12. Hand your badge to Gary. Now. Brenda's hands shook so violently, she could barely unclip the badge from her uniform. She fumbled with the plastic holder, her sobs now dry, choking gasps. She held it out to Gary, who took it as if it were radioactive. "You will then," Harrington continued, "escort yourself to the Central Operations Office and wait for HR. You are suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation, which," he added, his eyes flicking to the half-dozen passengers still recording with their phones, "I suspect will be very thorough and very, very public. Now get out of my sight." Brenda Jensen's walk of shame was a study in absolute social collapse. The authority she had wielded so cruelly just moments before had evaporated, leaving behind a shaking, defeated woman. She pushed her way through the still present security officers, who watched her go with indifferent expressions. She didn't look back. The silence in the terminal was deafening, a vacuum where her career used to be. Every eye was on her as she stumbled away, a ghost in a navy blue uniform. As soon as she was out of sight, Arthur Harrington's demeanor transformed once more. He turned to the stunned gate area, his CEO persona melting away, replaced by that of a concerned host. "Gary," he said, his voice kind but firm, "get on the PA, announce that we are commencing boarding and that I have personally authorized a complimentary premium beverage service for the entire aircraft economy, included as an apology for the delay and the unacceptable scene they were forced to witness. Use my name." "Yes, sir. Mr. Harrington, sir." "Right away." Gary stammered, his fingers fumbling with the microphone. Harrington then turned back to Elijah and Serena, who were standing by the jet bridge entrance, still processing the sheer velocity of their vindication. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," he said, "please, walk with me." He didn't just point them toward the plane. He picked up his own bag and personally escorted them down the jet bridge. The other first-class passengers, including the now silent Margaret, followed at a respectful distance, as if part of a royal procession. I cannot apologize enough," Harrington said as they walked. "I started this airline with 2 planes and a promise that we would treat every passenger with dignity. What you experience today, it's a cancer I thought we had cut out. Thank you, Mr. Harrington," Serena said, her voice still trembling. "We honestly didn't know what to do. We thought we were going to be arrested." "The failure is entirely ours," Harrington said grimly. "That woman, Ms. Jensen, she will not be in a position to ever do this to anyone again. I give you my personal word." As they stepped onto the aircraft, the lead flight attendant, a polished woman named Chloe, saw her CEO, and her face registered a flicker of professional surprise, which she instantly converted into a warm smile. "Mr. Harrington, what a wonderful surprise. Welcome aboard." "Chloe," he said, "these are Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. They are our guests of honor today. I trust you and your crew will show them the absolute best of trans-global service." "Of course, sir," Chloe said, her eyes immediately going to Elijah and Serena, sensing the gravity of the situation. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, welcome. Right this way to your pods, 1A and 1B. May I take your coats?" They were ushered to their seats, which were less like seats and more like small private cocoons, complete with closing doors, lie-flat beds, and massive entertainment screens. The humiliation of the gate felt a world away, yet it was still a fresh, open wound. As they sat down, still in a state of shock, Mr. Harrington lingered in the aisle. "Elijah," he said, using his first name. "I looked you up on my way down the jet bridge. You're with Apex Solutions. You're meeting with the Alistair Group on Wednesday." Elijah stared at him, stunned. Yes, I am." "I know them well," Harrington said with a small smile. Robert Alastair is a difficult man, but he respects people who don't back down. What you did out there, keeping your composure in the face of that was impressive. More impressive than anything she could have done. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a simple heavy stock business card. It had only his name, his private mobile number, and his personal email. "This is not just for apologies," he said, handing it to Elijah. "This flight and your return are of course on the house. That's a given. I'm also adding 5 intercontinental round-trip flights to your loyalty accounts for any destination you choose. But more than that, if you need anything, a character reference for your meeting, a different flight connection, or if you just feel in the coming days that you have not been made whole, you call this number, day or night." Elijah took the card. "Thank you, Arthur. I don't know what else to say." "Don't say anything," Harrington replied. "Enjoy your anniversary, and have a brilliant presentation in London." With a final respectful nod, he turned and walked back to his own seat in the second row. As the cabin door was prepared for closing, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Stevenson. We're just wrapping up here and should be pushing back in a few minutes. I'm also told that we have Transglobal's owner, Mr. Arthur Harrington, on board with us. On behalf of the flight crew, I'd like to thank him for his leadership, and I'd like to personally apologize to all of you, and especially to 2 of our guests in first class, for the completely unacceptable service failure you witnessed at the gate. That is not who we are. We will be demonstrating who we are for the duration of this flight. Cabin crew, please prepare for takeoff." Serena looked at Elijah, and for the first time that morning she smiled. A real, if fragile, smile. "Well," she whispered as a flight attendant poured her a glass of vintage champagne. "That's one way to get an upgrade." Elijah leaned back, closing his eyes. The roar of the engines a comforting vibration. The crisis had been averted. The karma had been swift. But as the plane climbed over the clouds, he couldn't shake the feeling. The victory felt good, but the fact that the battle had to be fought at all left a bitter taste in his mouth. While Elijah and Serena were climbing to 35,000 feet, sipping champagne, and trying to decompress from the adrenaline of their confrontation, Brenda Jensen's world was simultaneously in a state of free-fall. She had made it to the Central Operations Office, a windowless beige room in the bowels of the airport, smelling of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. She was told to sit and wait. She sat for an hour. Then 2. Her initial desperate sobs had dried up, leaving a cold, hard knot of terror in her stomach. Her phone was exploding. Not with messages of support, but with links. A colleague from another terminal had texted her a link to Twitter now, X, the passenger's video. The one that had captured her sneering first class that's ambitious was already rocketing through the internet. It had been posted by TravelBug88 with the caption, "Absolutely disgusting behavior from @Transglobal Air staff at O'Hare. This agent, Brenda, laughed at a black couple accused them of fraud and called security. Then the CEO, who was in line, stepped in. This is not okay." The video was 45 seconds long, but it was damning. It had her laugh. It had her demand for the credit card. It had her sneer about their associate. It was a masterclass in prejudice, and it had, in the space of 2 hours, already clocked over 300,000 views. Transglobal's corporate account was being hammered, inundated with thousands of messages, demanding her immediate termination. At 10:17 a.m., 2 people entered the room. One was the head of O'Hare's HR department, a stern woman named Helen. The other was TransGlobal's Senior VP of North American Operations, David McMillan, who looked like he had personally gargled acid. He was supposed to be in a budget meeting. Instead, he was here cleaning up a mess that was now the #1 trending topic on Twitter. Brenda Jensen. Helen began, her voice flat. We are here to discuss the incident at Gate M12. It was a misunderstanding, Brenda immediately said, her voice high and defensive. The system was slow. I've been with this company for 22 years. My record is spotless. David McMillan slammed a thick manila folder onto the table, making Brenda jump. Spotless, he hissed. Your record is a disgrace, Ms. Jensen. I've spent the last 2 hours reviewing your file. Do you know what's in here? Brenda was silent. 14, he said. Official passenger complaints in the last 3 years alone. 7 of them alleging abusive language. 3 alleging discriminatory behavior. You've been formally written up twice by your direct supervisor for customer escalation issues. You were sent to mandatory de-escalation training in 2023, which according to the records you completed in 45 minutes, a course that takes 4 hours. My supervisor said I was just firm, Brenda protested. Your supervisor, Mr. Peterson, has also been suspended effective immediately for gross negligence in managing his team, David snapped. You weren't firm, Ms. Jensen. You were a liability, a bully. And today you bullied the wrong passengers in front of the one man who could end you with a single sentence. Please, she begged, the tears starting again. It's the holidays, my mortgage. I can't I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll take the training again for real this time. Helen, the HR manager, slid a single piece of paper across the table. That will not be necessary. Ms. Jensen, as of 10:20 a.m., your employment with TransGlobal Airways is terminated for cause. For cause? Brenda's world tilted. That means no severance, no benefits. It means, David said, that your repeated documented history of misconduct, culminating in today's catastrophic reputation-damaging and potentially illegal act of discrimination, constitutes a severe breach of your employment contract. You are to be escorted from the premises. Your final paycheck, minus any outstanding dues, will be mailed to you. You are no longer welcome on TransGlobal property. Brenda looked at the paper. The words swam before her eyes. Terminated. Gross misconduct. Discriminatory acts. Meanwhile, on Flight 771, Arthur Harrington was connected to the plane's high-speed Wi-Fi. He was not reading The Economist. He was on a conference call with his entire executive board. This is not a training issue, people, he was saying, his voice a low growl that made his executives in various time zones flinch. This is a cultural failure. It's a rot. We've become complacent. This Brenda, she felt comfortable doing this. That's the part that's keeping me awake. She felt empowered. I want a full-scale audit of all passenger complaints from the last 5 years, flagged by employee and demographics. I want to know who else is hiding in the system. I want Peterson's entire management tree reviewed. And I want a press release on my desk before we land in London. No excuses, no corporate doublespeak. I want it to say we failed, we are sorry, and we have taken immediate and permanent action. Yes, that means we state she's been fired. I don't care about a wrongful termination suit. Let her try. He ended the call and stared out the window at the blue, sunlit expanse of the Atlantic. He had built an empire, but he knew with a sickening certainty that an empire is only as strong as its most vulnerable border. And Brenda Jensen had just shown him where his was. He looked over the cabin at Elijah and Serena. They had put their privacy partition up, and he hoped they were sleeping or at least finding some peace. He knew this wasn't over. The firing was just the beginning. The real karma, the real justice was yet to come. By the time Flight 771 touched down at Heathrow, the story was no longer a viral tweet. It was a global news item. Transglobal CEO fires Gate Karen mid-boarding, screamed the headlines on CNN, the BBC, and countless online portals. The passenger's video was now interlaced with professional news reports. Brenda Jensen's name and face were plastered everywhere. Elijah and Serena were met at the jet bridge, not by press. Harrington's team had anticipated that, and moved them through a private diplomatic channel, but by a personal representative from the airline's London office who whisked them into a private car, bypassing customs entirely. Their luggage would be delivered to their hotel, the Savoy, where Transglobal had also. They discovered upgraded them to the best suite in the house. Elijah's presentation 3 days later was a resounding success. The Alistair Group, having already seen the news, greeted him with a new level of respect. He wasn't just a VP from a tech firm. He was the man who had calmly stood his ground against a corporate tyrant and won. The deal was signed. Their anniversary celebrated at a Michelin star restaurant was quiet, reflective, and deeply healing. But they were not done. A week later from their suite, they contacted a prominent civil rights law firm. "We don't want money," Serena explained to the lawyers over a video call. "Not for us. But we cannot be the only people she has done this to. What about the people who didn't have a CEO standing behind them? What about the people who were arrested, who missed their flights, who didn't have the right clothes or the right credit card?" The law firm, armed with the authority of their new clients, filed a sweeping civil rights lawsuit against Transglobal Airways. Not against Brenda Jensen, but against the corporation itself, for fostering and protecting a culture of systemic bias and racial discrimination, and for negligent supervision of its employees. Arthur Harrington, true to his word, did not fight it. He called Elijah personally. "You are doing the right thing," he said, his voice heavy. "Our internal audit. It's worse than I thought. Your incident, Elijah, it's pulled the thread on a whole tapestry of failure. We're not fighting you. We're going to settle, and we're going to let you and your lawyers dictate the non-monetary terms." The settlement was historic. The amount was sealed, but rumors placed it in the high 7 figures. Every penny, as promised, was wired by Elijah and Serena to a foundation supporting victims of racial profiling and funding civil rights litigation. But the real karma was in the terms. Transglobal was forced to 1. Implement a new mandatory 8-week anti-bias and de-escalation training program designed and run by an external independent civil rights organization chosen by Elijah and Serena's legal team. 2. Create a new independent passenger advocacy board with the power to investigate and overrule employee conduct, with 2 seats permanently reserved for consumer rights advocates. 3. Fund a multi-million-dollar ad campaign run on its own channels and in national media apologizing for the incident and outlining the concrete steps they were taking. And what of Brenda Jensen? The karma for her was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, grinding dissolution. She was quite simply the most famous fired gate agent in the world. Her name was toxic. She was a pariah. She attempted to sue Transglobal for wrongful termination. The case was thrown out of court in summary judgment, with the judge citing the mountain of digital and documentary evidence against her. She tried to get other jobs. No airline would touch her. No customer-facing company would risk it. A Google search of her name was a digital graveyard. The Karen label which she had earned so spectacularly was permanent. Her work friends, the ones she used to gossip with about passengers, vanished. Her supervisor Peterson fired, and fighting for his own pension, refused to take her calls. Within 6 months, she defaulted on her mortgage. The house she was so proud of was foreclosed. The last anyone heard, she had moved 2 states away, was using her mother's maiden name, and was working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gas station, a place where no one cared about her name, her past, or her 22 years of firmness. She was in the end invisible. The hard karma was not just the loss of her job. It was the complete and total annihilation of the one thing she valued her perceived status. She had tried to strip Elijah and Serena of their dignity, and in doing so had lost her own permanently and publicly. Gary, the nervous young agent who told the truth, was promoted to a gate supervisor position within 3 months. Margaret, the impatient passenger, was identified from the video and quietly banned from Transglobal for life. And Arthur Harrington, in a sweeping move, restructured his entire North American operations using the Thompson incident as a moral compass for a new generation of employees. Justice in this case was not just served. It was a multi-course, painstakingly detailed, and ultimately very bitter meal. 1 year. 365 days had passed since the incident. The air in Chicago O'Hare's International Terminal 5 was as always a familiar soup of anxiety and stale coffee. But for Elijah and Serena Thompson, it was also a place of ghosts. They were standing by a strange twist of fate and airline scheduling at gate M12. It was the same flight. Transglobal 771 to London. This time, however, it was not a high-stakes business meeting. It was the first of the 5 intercontinental flights Arthur Harrington had given them. It was a true vacation, a just-because trip. "I can't believe we're here," Serena whispered, her hand finding Elijah's. "It feels smaller. The ceiling seems lower. Everything looks different when you're not having your life threatened." Elijah murmured back, a grim smile on his face. He looked at the podium. It was the same counter, the same blue and silver Transglobal logo, but the person standing behind it was entirely different. A young man named Paul, his uniform impeccable, and his name tag a new design with a clear, bold font straight, was patiently handling a new crisis. An elderly woman, her face a mask of panic, was waving a crumpled itinerary. "But it has to be today," she cried, her voice thin. My son is getting married in Edinburgh tomorrow. I must have read the date wrong. Oh dear. Oh dear." Elijah and Serena tensed. They watched a shared involuntary reflex. This was the moment. This was the pressure point where the old system would have cracked, where Brenda Jensen would have deployed her venom. Paul the agent didn't sigh. He didn't roll his eyes. He leaned forward, his voice calm and audible. "Ma'am, I see the problem. This ticket is for tomorrow the 29th, and I see the flight is completely full today. But you know what? Please have a seat right here. Don't you worry. I'm going to make a call. We're going to figure this out." He didn't dismiss her. He included her. He then picked up his phone, and they saw a familiar face walk over Gary. Gary, no longer the nervous trainee, was now the gate's station operations supervisor. He wore the new graphite-grey blazer of Transglobal Management. He saw the elderly woman conferred with Paul, and then his eyes scanned the line and found Elijah and Serena. A look of profound recognition crossed his face. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked over to them, his hand extended. "Mir and Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice firm and professional. "It is an honor to have you back." "Gary," Elijah said, shaking his hand. "Good to see you. It looks like you're in charge now." "Trying to be," Gary said with a small smile. He gestured with his head toward the distressed passenger. "That's the new policy in action. It's called the Passenger Advocacy Protocol. We're empowered to fix the problem, not just quote the rules." "And the old way?" Serena asked quietly. Gary's expression sobered. "We had a complete clean-out. The audit that Mr. Harrington ordered, it was bad. Brenda wasn't an exception. She was just the most blatant example. She and 3 other supervisors, including her boss, Peterson, were all terminated. The culture it's better. People are actually happy to come to work." He nodded to them, then returned to the podium. "Paul, get her on. Use the M12 discretionary fund. It's a real fund Mr. Harrington created specifically for this gate as a reminder. Find her a seat. If you can't, you are authorized to bump a non-revenue employee and pay for their hotel. Get her to her son's wedding." The elderly woman burst into tears this time of gratitude. As Elijah and Serena handed over their passes, Paul smiled. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, welcome. We have you in 1A and 1B. We are so glad to have you flying with us today." There was no suspicion, no sneer, just service. As they settled into the exact same seats as the year before, Elijah's phone buzzed. It was an email from the Thompson-Harrington Foundation for Civil Advocacy, the organization they had funded with their entire settlement. The subject line read, "Case Update Your First Victory." He opened it. The email detailed the story of a young man, a college student named David, who had been falsely accused of shoplifting at a department store in Atlanta. He was arrested, held for 48 hours, and was facing expulsion. The store's security, it turned out, had a history of profiling. The foundation had taken his case, provided a high-powered legal team, pro bono, and had not only gotten the charges dismissed, but had successfully countersued the retail chain, forcing them to fire the security staff and implement new anti-bias training. The email ended with a quote from the student. "I thought my life was over. No one would listen. Then this foundation stepped in like a guardian angel. They said my case was exactly why they existed. They saved me." Elijah showed the email to Serena. She put her hand over her heart, her eyes shining. The true hard karma wasn't just Brenda Jensen's pathetic anonymous end-stocking shelves in the dead of night at a highway gas station. Her name a forgotten synonym for bigotry. The real karma was this. It was the positive, unstoppable ripple. It was the elderly woman who would make it to her son's wedding. It was the young student who would graduate from college. It was the new healthy culture at the very gate that had been their personal hell. As the plane pushed back, Elijah looked out the window at the concrete and glass of O'Hare. He had won more than a fight. He had changed the rules of the game. The story of Elijah, Serena, and Brenda isn't just a case of what goes around comes around. It's a powerful real-life reminder that dignity is not a premium extra. It's standard. What we saw here was the collision of prejudice and power and the stunning arrival of justice from the most unexpected place. Brenda Jensen's actions, fueled by bitterness, cost her everything. Elijah and Serena's composure, even in the face of humiliation, sparked a change that will protect countless travelers in the future. Their ordeal proves that one voice, one moment of standing firm can expose a sickness, and one person in power, like Arthur Harrington, can choose to cure it. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe that respect should be our default setting, please hit that like button. Share this video with your friends so this message can be heard. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more true stories of karma and justice. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know in the comments below.